thanks everybody for giving us the opportunity to speak to you tonight here. Basically, what we'd like to do is explain a little bit about what's happened with the Solar Streets scheme that quite a lot of people who are on the call may well remember from 2 years ago. And what we would like to do is update you with what's going on in the scheme and to basically relaunch it in Frome, but also tell you what's been going on elsewhere. So what we're going to cover is what is Solar Streets, what is the concept behind it, and introduce IDEA Renewable Energy Systems, who are the creator, if you like, and installer of the Solar Street scheme, and the director of IDEA, Ian Dunstone, will be joining us a little bit later on to handle some of the more technical queries that you may have. Then I'll spend a bit of time talking about what solar panel systems are, what bits there are to the system, and also spend a bit of time on the economics of solar panels, because this keeps changing, but it's one of the most frequently asked questions that we are asked is, well, so is it still worth investing in solar panels? And the answer to that, by the way, is yes. The guys at Frome Town Council also asked us to do a survey about what people thought of their Solar Streets installation. So we'd like to share with you some of the results of that survey, and then finally to tell you what you can do next if you're interested in going forward with a Solar Streets installation. So there are 4 bits to the Solar Streets offer. The first point is an attractive price point, although this price point has moved a little bit since the first offer, and I'll cover that in detail in a moment. We think this represents a good price compared to what you could get if you approached somebody for a standalone quote. The second aspect of it is there are a number of optional extras that you might want to consider, such as an iBoost device, which can send surplus electricity, especially in the summer, to your hot water tank to provide hot water, as well as just providing electricity. And there is also battery storage, which is a very popular option at the moment. And each solar installation saves basically just under 1 ton of carbon dioxide per year. And if you want to know what a ton of carbon dioxide looks like, if you can imagine a cube with each of its sides being 27 feet long, so it's basically about the size of a house, that's what a balloon filled with that much carbon dioxide would look like. And then the fourth aspect to the scheme is a community fund donation, which is £50 for each residential installation and £100 for each commercial installation. And that pot is donated back to the town council, who can decide what to do with it, and we'll remind everyone what happened to the last one, but all it has to be is to do with a sustainable project. So let's talk about prices. So when the scheme was live in Frome 2 years ago, the advertised price was £3,750 for a 14-panel system. But what has happened since then is the power output of each panel has changed quite dramatically. Back in 2019, the panels were rated at 275 watts, and they're now rated at 360 watts, which means that for the same size roof, you can get a considerably larger output from the system. But perhaps more relevantly, it means that smaller properties can now benefit from having a system installed, which perhaps they couldn't have done before. So we're going to take 2 examples. The first one is a 10-panel system, which times 360 watts per panel gives you a capacity of 3.6 kilowatt peak, and the price is now £4,100, including VAT. If you compare that to what the Energy Savings Trust say is the average size system in the UK, they quote the average size being 3.5 kilowatt peak and the price being £4,800. So there's a bit of a saving there, and we think their figures are a little bit more out of date. And if you look at a bigger system, so a 12-panel system that's perhaps most relevant for a 4-bedroomed house, then the Solar Streets price is £4,300 for a 4.3 kilowatt system. And other quotes we've seen from suppliers such as Spirit Energy, who are based in the Reading area, they're charging £6,000 for a 4 kilowatt peak system. So it's a little bit all over the place, but we believe that the solar streets price is competitive. But what we do recommend is that you should decide, if you should decide to go ahead with an installation, is do a little bit of spot checking for yourself and make sure that you're happy that the price you're being offered reflects the good deal that we believe it to be. Just a little bit on who is IDEA. So IDEA, based originally in Westbury in Wiltshire, so not very far away at all, have been trading since 2007, which is a long time in this industry. And it means that they've rode the roller coaster ride of various different feed-in tariffs and various different solar panel prices that's gone on since the late 2000s. They are specialists in solar PV, battery storage and EV charging points, and to date have installed over 1,000 installations, small residential, commercial, including schools, and what you might describe as utility scale solar farms. They're committed to helping customers take control of their energy bills and fight climate change. And they opened their second branch in High Wycombe in October 2020, which was mainly as a result of the extra solar street schemes that had come on board down the Thames Valley to the west, to the east of where you guys are. My company, myself and Kat Noble's company, is called the Green Group UK Limited, and we act as the marketing arm for Solar Streets, so working in partnership with IDEA. So when you are considering getting a solar installation, it's quite important that you make sure that the providing company has got some of the credentials that you need to operate in this industry. And here's the main three. The first one is they have to be members of the MCS, which is the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. And they are the people who certify that your system has been installed correctly so that you can claim the smart export guarantee. Previously, it was needed for the feed-in tariff, but you need a MCS certificate to be able to claim the export guarantee, which we'll come to later. Secondly, you need a degree of consumer protection, just in case anything happens to IDEA whilst they are holding your deposit money. And they're a member of HISE, which means that if anything did happen, then you would get your money back. So that's a good bit of peace of mind. And third and finally, NAPIT is a body that basically ensures that installers in such industries have got all the relevant insurance in place should there be any problem as well. So when you are looking at perhaps different suppliers, make sure that they've got an equivalent of all of those three options. So the big question is, how do you get a competitive price for the panels? And this is basically done by focusing on a town or an area at a time to make sure that we can get quite a number of people interested. And we try and get at least 10 installations grouped together so that we can deliver the economies of scale. As we've done in Frome, work with councils or perhaps local environmental groups to raise awareness, but the economies of scale are in the marketing in terms of getting people together, the surveys so that the surveyor can go from house to house and get good productivity while going through. The scaffolding can be moved from one property within the town to another property within the town rather than go back to the base. But perhaps most importantly, of course, buying the various bits of equipment. So if you're buying 10 sets of panels, you'll get a better price than you will for a single set of panels. So that's how we can utilize economies of scale to get a good price offered to the customers for Solar Streets. So the story so far, so the great news is then Frome is top of the list because this is where it all started. But as you can see, since April 2019, when that scheme was launched, we've gone through a lot of other schemes in nearby Wells and then in West Berkshire. And then the first town that we got involved with as the Green Group, which was Henley upon Thames, and then we've gone to St Albans, and you can see there that it's a mixture of people in the West Country and people in the east part of the Thames Valley. So down your way, you've got Bruton and Castle Carey, Brew Valley, Somerton, Swanage, and Milbourne Port and Sherborne as well. So across all of these schemes, there's now been something like 750 inquiries, with over 550 surveys and quotations completed. And the number of installations, including Frome, is now up to about 170. And that means that about 170 tonnes of carbon have been saved per year across all of those towns. So it's been a great success, and we've got more towns who want to come and join us on this scheme as well. You can see there on the top, I think the top ones there are in Frome. So these were some of the ones that were done a couple of years ago. And then further down, you can see some of the more recent installations that we've had. And you can see that they're now pure black panels with no silver framing on them. And these are the 360 watts that we've done as well. And at this point, I'd like to invite Steve Tanner, who is one of the councillors for Frome Town Council, who has had an installation done under this scheme. And Steve, we'd really just like to hear how it's gone for you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we had ours installed in November, and which probably the wrong time of the year, but that was just the way it was. So as you can see, we've got 8 panels installed. They're 350 watt each, so we've got 2.8 kilowatts that we can generate at any one time, and that goes through the battery, as you see, which I understand is 5.2 kilowatt. That can take that can store that. We found it, especially over the last sort of 2 months. It's made a massive difference to our electricity usage. To give you an idea, today the panels generated 11.2 kilowatts of energy so far today, and that's on a sort of a changeable day. I work from home. We've used 8.2 kilowatts, and the last time I checked, just before the meeting, that the battery was at 81% charge. So you know, before too long, we will be able to go through pretty much the whole day without actually buying any electricity. I think the main thing for us has been a difference in understanding what appliances to put on at what time. We get the sun on the house from about 11 o'clock in the morning. So we just make sure that anything that's drawing a lot of power doesn't go on before 11 o'clock in the morning. And we find that the panels and the battery can, you know, can accommodate, as long as we don't put everything on at the same time, it can accommodate it, you know, pretty well, quite frankly.
That's great. Okay, thanks a lot, Steve. I'll be re-echoing a few of those sentiments as we go through the presentation. And just to confirm to everyone, we didn't speak before, so I didn't know what Steve was going to say. So I'm glad he's had a good experience from his system. Okay. So just to carry on a little bit further, so we talked about the community benefit, and as probably quite a lot of people know, what happened with the community benefit from the 70 installations that we got in Frome, and that 70 number represents approximately 1% of the owner-occupiers in the town, was to provide a sizable donation to the system that was being put in at the YMCA. So I think it's a very nice contribution that was made to a worthwhile cause in the town. So that gives you an example. And some other towns have put smaller awards for energy efficiency measures, and are also looking at doing a similar thing to public buildings as well. So that gives you an idea of what you can do with the community fund. For those who don't know what a solar installation looks like, let's have a go at that. Hopefully play you a video here. Okay, so just to go over some of the various bits that there are to do with the solar system install. So you've got on the top of your roof, you've got some solar PV panels. PV stands for photovoltaic, and basically that turns daylight into usable DC current, which then goes through a device called an inverter, which transforms it in from DC to AC electricity, which means you can then either use it yourself or you can export it to the grid. Now, the compass over to the left-hand side with its rather sinister S shape is sort of implying that your solar panels really work only if they're facing in a southerly direction. That's not quite true. The best output is a due south orientation, but you can get quite good output on anything from east through south to west. And in east, you get more output in the mornings, and on west facing panels you get more in the afternoon as well. But the only direction that we wouldn't recommend installing panels in is if your only roof space faces north. That wouldn't be as good in terms of output. As you might imagine, you get more sunshine hours during the summer than you do in the winter. But as Steve mentioned, he was still getting some output from his system on a cloudy day like today. So you can see in the middle there in 2018, the most popular months were May, June and July, but you were still getting some output in the winter months as well. And if you think about the output and how you use electricity, this is actually from a school, but the blue bars represent the output of the system and the orange bars are the demand from the household. So you can see that between April and August, it's likely that you won't be able to use all the output of your system. And therefore you'll probably be exporting to the grid. But in the winter and autumn months, it's more likely that you'll still be net importing from the grid. And that's quite an important point, which we'll come back to. These are the current panels that are being specified. They are 360 watts per panel. In terms of size, they're basically just over 1 meter wide in portrait mode and about 1.75 meters tall. They each weigh about 20 kilograms, but of course that is spread over that 1.8 meter squared area. And as you saw in the video, they're mounted on frames, and the frames are mounted into the rafters of your roof. They don't go through the tiles. The panels have got a 12-year product warranty against any failure, but they've also got something called a performance warranty, which means that even after 25 years, the output of the panels will still be 85% of what they were on day one. The ideal tilt angle to put the panels at is 35 degrees, but if your roof is at, say, 15 degrees or even at 45 degrees, you will still get a reasonable output, just not the optimum output. And the panels are made by a company called Trina, and they are one of the top 10 ethical manufacturers for solar panels. So you can look those up as well. Steve's got a battery. He's got the middle battery there, a 5.21. Basically, they cost about £3,000 on top of the solar system. They weigh about 32 kilograms, and the dimensions you can see there, they're about the same size as a PC base station in the old days, and they last for about 10 years. And what these do, basically, is they will store any solar output that you have not used yourself during the day, and then when your solar system is not generating, you can program it to use the electricity that's in the battery first before you start using the grid. And when we look at the comparative prices of grid versus solar produced electricity, you'll see why that's useful. We're often asked about whether you can put panels on flat roofs, and the answer to that is yes, but you do need to have some sort of framing for them. So when you're looking at the flat roof application, you have to think about both the weight of the panels and also the weight of the framing. And in that example there, that's an example where there's two directions. So you've probably got the panels facing east and west so that they can maximize the output in both the morning and the afternoon. Steve very eloquently described there about the best way to use the output of your solar system so that you do use your energy appliances sequentially during the day from that time that he mentioned about 11 o'clock there, and that's a very good way of doing it. But what you're trying to do with all of the things that you do on the right hand side there is you're trying to save the amount of grid produced electricity that you are using, and that way you're saving perhaps a minimum now of 5 pence per kilowatt hour versus what you would have bought from the grid for. But if you can't use all of your electricity using your own appliances, since January 2020, you can benefit from something called the Smart Export Guarantee. So all the larger electricity suppliers are obliged to offer you this if you've got an installation that is MCS certified. But each company is a different tariff, and all the government said is the tariff has got to be greater than zero. So we've got a relationship with Octopus Energy, and they give you a credit of 5.5 pence per kilowatt hour for every unit that you export to the grid. But a company like British Gas, for example, only gives you, I think it's 2 or 3p per kilowatt hour. So when you're selecting your supplier, you've got to think about what is the price they charge you for grid electricity, and what is the benefit they're giving you for smart export guarantee producing electricity. I'm going to very quickly do a bit of maths with you. So let's assume that you've got a system which has got a capacity of 4 kilowatts. 4 kilowatt peak as it is described. Now that will produce something like 3,600 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, which happens to be roughly the same amount that a that sort of house would consume. The only trouble is, as we saw in that graph of the schools, in the winter, the solar system can't generate enough for all your requirements, which include a lot more lighting. And in the summer, it's likely that you're going to have to export some of your electricity as well. So if we assume the MCS reckon 37% own use of your solar output is quite a good number for people who live at home. So if you take 37% of the 3,600 kilowatts, that gives you 1,332, which gives you a saving of the 15p per kilowatt hour that you would have got from the grid. So that's £200. Now, with the other 63% of your output, you can export that to the grid, but you're only getting 5p per kilowatt hour from that. So that would only save you £113. So put the two figures together and you get a saving in year zero, if you like, of £313 per year. So you could say, okay, well, if that system's cost me about £4,000, dividing that by into the £313 would probably give me a payback in about 12 years. But, and it's quite a big but, the prices of electricity have been going up by more than inflation. So these savings will get bigger over a period of time. And we reckon that the sort of range of payback is somewhere between 8 and 12 years, depending on how much of your output you can use yourself. But it still gives you a decent rate of return. And the system will last for 25 years. And the only thing you will have to change in that 25 years is the inverter, which currently costs about £500, which you'll have to change about halfway through the system. So from an economics point of view, it still stacks up even without any feed-in tariff. And that's because the price of the panels has come down, and especially the price of these panels under the Solar Street Scheme is so competitive. So, change of subject. So 2 years ago, there were 69 or 70 people who bought a system from IDEA under the Solar Streets banner. So we emailed them in April 2021 and asked them what did they think of the system. So we had 23 responses in a month, which is 1/3, which is a very good rate of response there. And I think everybody probably realised that because this was the first time the scheme had been done with IDEA at a reasonably large scale straight away, there might be a few teething problems along the way. So first of all, what did they buy? So there was 23 solar panel systems, of which 6 of those included a battery and 3 of those included an iBoost for heating water. And iBoost is the way of using your excess electricity produced by the solar system in the summer to heat your hot water via an immersion element in your hot water tank. So you've got to have a hot water tank and immersion element, but you can use that device there. And there was a few other extras and things that were bought as well. So how big was the system that was bought? Well, as I say, this was when the panels had a lower output, but you can see there's quite a variation in the sort of size. 5 people bought 16 panels, 5 people bought 12 panels, 6 bought between 10 and 14, 2 people bought 8 panels and 1 bought 9, and 3 bought 6 panels, which was the smallest size at that time. So quite a range of size of installation that was actually put in. Very interesting. Why did people decide they wanted to buy a solar system? Well, the most popular one, as you might guess, is to reduce carbon emissions, and 39% of the people said that that was the most important motivator for them. Secondly, to save money. Thirdly, to protect against rising energy prices, and then the fifth one, to become self-sufficient with the energy supply. And quite often people picked 2 of these, and it was usually reduced carbon emissions and something to do with money or protection as well. We mentioned that in my little example there, 37% of own use is quite a sort of decent number, but we've had a real range, and what this is the proportion of the total electricity that has been provided by the solar energy system. So you can see at the lower end, these sort of numbers were something like 19%, but at the higher end, we've got some people who've got 69 to 75% of their total demand has been met by the solar system. And that is probably people with smaller systems, I would suggest. But it just goes to show you that if you pick the right size of system, you can get a real contribution towards your electricity needs from your solar system. So that's great from that point of view as well. The 5-point satisfaction rating, which goes from being very dissatisfied, hopefully there's not many of them, to very satisfied at the other end of the scale, works out at points out of 5. So basically what we did is we scored out of 5 what people thought, and as you can see there's 1 or 2 people who weren't very happy with their system, but in the vast majority of cases people were either very satisfied or more than satisfied. So the score for the system itself was 4.4. The score for the installation and customer service associated with that was still pretty creditable 4.1, and Frome Town Council's involvement was seen as very, very positive as well. So that scored 4.2. So all of these scores are very popular, and you can see that by far the majority of the scores and ratings given were in the satisfied and more than satisfied, sorry, very satisfied and more than satisfied category. But of course, for anything like this, the real acid test was, so if you think it was good, would you recommend it to anybody else? Oh, I'm going to come back to that one. I'll come back to one there. And the answer to that question was in 83% of the cases, people would say, yes, I would recommend this to one of my friends. And only 1 person said they wouldn't. And if you, one popular way of looking at this is to say you take all the positives and you take the negatives away from them, and you get, in this case, a net score of 79, which is still very, very positive. So overall, people thought the scheme was very, very popular and has worked well for them. The one question that I was just on the previous slide was, is there any way you can get funding to put your panels up, or do you have to put your own money into it? Well, there is an organisation called Lendology, who are a non-for-profit organisation operating in the Southwest. And they work with councils to provide homeowner loans. So we'd always recommend that you do your own due diligence on any financing, and we're not particularly recommending this one, but it's quite interesting that they show on their site how much it would cost you if you didn't have the money to buy the panels up front and wanted to take out a loan, how long it would take you to repay that loan and what it would cost you. And in this example here, you can see that the loan would be repaid in 8 years, but of course the panels last for 25 as well. So overall, the results of the survey were very encouraging. We're very pleased to see those. Just to finish off with what is the potential for the further installations in Frome. There's about 11,000 homes in Frome according to the 2011 census. I'm sure there's been more added since then, and there was 7,700 owner-occupied homes. So you'd expect to get about 77 installations based on that 1% of owner occupied metric that we've used before. But of course, Frome's already got 1% extra owner occupiers. So the challenge is, can they get another 1% and add another 70? We certainly hope so. And if that 77 was repeated again, there'd be a further benefit of £3,850 and a further 77 tonnes of carbon saved per year. So if all of this is interesting and you'd like to go further, then all you have to do is email your full address and the contact details to info@idea.co.uk. And what that will do is they will start off with a Google Earth survey, which will look at your roof. It'll look at its size, its orientation, and whether there's any buildings or trees that might give you a shading issue. And that might rule your house out as being infeasible. And that happens in perhaps 15 to 20% of the time. With the other 80%, then it goes through a process of a technical survey and a design and a quotation for your system. And if that is acceptable to you, then IDEA will then come out and briefly survey your roof to make sure everything's okay there before they take a deposit for the system. If you want to know anything else, we've set up a webpage called solarstreets.co.uk called Frome. There is also a very good page on the Town Council's website as well. This gives full details of the scheme, explains who the sponsors are. It tells you when the Q&A sessions are, and that's where we tend to put recordings of the sessions like tonight as well. There are videos on things like the economics of solar panels, a bit like that single example I gave you before, but with various different scenarios as well. And we also asked the energy industry if there was any companies that would like to support Solar Streets by offering customers a good deal on switching their electricity and gas supply and commuting and contributing to the community fund. And there is an optional deal you've got there with Octopus Energy, and what they basically do is they'll give you £50 and they'll put another £50 into the community fund as well. And you don't have to have solar panels installed to qualify for that. You just have to switch electricity and energy, sorry. And then any other questions, you can email us at info@solarstreets.co.uk,